Well, they are the headlines around the world. And of course, here in Michigan, you can see the Detroit News here, Trump indicted. And then go ahead and take a look at the Detroit Free Press. New York jury indicts Trump. Former President Donald Trump has been indicted. The first time in history an ex-president has been charged with a crime. Of course, as we know, the indictment is sealed, but the president is expected to be back in New York on Tuesday. Right now, you are looking at live pictures of West Palm Beach's airport, and that is the former president's plane sitting there in Florida. Of course, the president is at his place in Mar-a-Lago right now, surrounded by his advisors. That's another live picture of Mar-a-Lago right now. And they all have to work now with the New York DA's office in New York on when he will turn himself in for arraignment, which is expected on Tuesday. And here's a live look for you at Trump Tower, of course, in Manhattan, with all the traffic going by on a Friday afternoon. And good afternoon to you. I'm Christy McDonald. We are continuing our live coverage here on Local 4 Plus of the former president's indictment and really its political impact here in Michigan. Of course, the former president won Michigan back here in 2016. He lost here in 2020, but he contested Michigan's results. He has a large amount of support here in Michigan with Republicans, including the new GOP chair, Christina Caramo, whom he endorsed for Secretary of State, which she did lose that position. We also had 16 Michigan men, and this bears repeating and understanding. 11 of them convicted, 5 of them still going through process, convicted of crimes involving the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th of 2021 that the former president has been accused of inciting. And of course, the former president is running again in 2024. And interestingly enough, this indictment would not prevent him from running. So there is really a lot to talk about today in the historical nature of what we've seen transpire in the last 24 hours and the legal angles of what happens next. We're also going to be taking you live to New York City as they look at some really security preparations for the former president to turn himself in and to be arraigned next week. But we are going to start our conversation with Caitlin Buss, the assistant editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Dave Giulio, political science professor at Oakland University, and really on, I think, the historical impact here and then the impact going forward in Michigan. It's good to see you both. I mean, we've talked in the last couple of weeks, everyone waiting for this to happen, and then it feels it got quiet. And then yesterday, Dave, let me start with you, reaction to what you saw unfold.
Well, Christy, I think you used the best word possible, right? Historic, given the fact that this has never happened before. Some former presidents have come close to being indicted. I think the closest is probably Bill Clinton back in the late 90s over his lies in a deposition over the Monica Lewinsky scandal. But I think from a historical political standpoint, we can't escape the fact that this is first time. And I think we'll probably get into this as we have this conversation. But I think that this actually plays right into the hands of Trump, and I think he's going to use this to his advantage as he seeks this GOP nomination that's going to really get heated up here in Michigan, in about a year.
Yeah, and that's what I think is really fascinating in all of this is going forward. He's still going to be campaigning. This isn't going to stop him from continuing to run. Caitlin, the headline out of the Detroit News today in the editorial department was indictment is a political minefield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot here. Like Dave said, obviously a historic, occurrence, but politically it has a lot of ramifications. I mean, the Trump supporter base is going to stay there. There is nothing at this point that can come out, I don't think, that will dissuade his supporters, and it might turn into these protests and violence. I think that's one of the risks. But at the same time, people who voted for him already knew this information, and they voted for him once or twice in the past. So it does stand to fan the flames of how they already perceive that Trump has been treated. At the same time, it's a great political strategy for Democrats as they're trying to continue to divide the Republican base, even moving into the 2024 nomination. And that strategy has worked for them, for several elections now of dividing Republicans over this kind of stuff. So I think we're at I don't know whose opinion it's necessarily going to change, but it certainly is a tinderbox for what could be coming in the future.
Dave, when we look at Michigan specifically, and I know everyone around the country is watching this news right now, but I think we're in a unique position here in the state where we have such a varied base. You have leaders in the Michigan Republican Party now who are firmly for Trump. And Caitlin talks about the division of the various layers of what the Republican Party is right now, and the ability that this will consolidate that strength and support for him. And to Caitlin's point, that this isn't anything new that Trump supporters haven't heard before.
Yeah, it's dredging up old elements of Trump's baggage, right? I mean, because that's really what it is. And I think that the consolidation of support is something to really watch. We've seen polling numbers in the last couple of weeks when some of his potential rivals have really started to engage in a campaign for the nomination. Folks like Nikki Haley, and even though he's not formally announced, Ron DeSantis. And I think that even those kinds of folks have started to come to Trump's defense almost in the last 24 hours, 18 hours, however long it's been. Where they are doing him favors by attacking or questioning the prosecution, and I think that is maybe an overlay of what's happening at other levels of the party, all the way down to the grassroots, where that is, folks are going to fall in line behind him.
Yeah, Caitlin, does that surprise you? I mean, the amount of, I think, really support you're seeing nationally from the Republican Party. And I want to ask you also specifically about Michigan. What do you think that we're going to see from other Republicans, rallying around him, questioning the process? Oh, we lost Caitlin. And we'll get her back here in a minute. But Dave, that's what I think is the really interesting here when we look at really the Michigan Republican Party consolidating and getting the amount of numbers behind the president, that there is a possibility that this is something that will grow stronger for him.
So yeah, I think that is true, and I think that there are right, where we will absolutely see folks like Christina Caramo, Matt DePerno, right, those folks that were in his camp already come in and question and challenge the prosecution that's underway. But who, as you both know, is no fan of Trump. He was even wondering about the prop of this prosecution. So, if you've got Peter Meyer questioning Trump's prosecution, that says something.
Yeah, I mean, that was what surprised me yesterday too. Caitlin, we've got you back right now. Go ahead and give us, your perception of, you're seeing a lot of Republicans that are kind of really questioning the process here. And in terms of what do you think that we're going to see with Michigan Republicans in the next couple of weeks here?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fascinating. I mean, we're going to see Trump get booked, handcuffed in a court of law. I think those optics stand to be worse for Democrats than Republicans. I mean, that's going to be a hard thing for the country to see a former president going through. I think in Michigan, we have had such a strong base of support for Trump here, and such an outspoken alliance between some of the leadership and Trump that we might get, messages via Michigan from the president. We just don't know exactly what the effect is going to be here on Republicans, but we do know that they're going to support him. And the optics of that underdog, I'm not sure what that'll do. Trump has a unique opportunity here to frame what his own story is, because the indictments are sealed. And so he's allowed to get out there and talk about it like he always has. And I think that gives him a leg up, honestly.
Dave, and is that something that we need to understand the process better, that when the narrative can be fed that this was done in secret, and then we don't know what the indictment is, when really this is exactly what our judicial process is playing out in New York?
Absolutely, and I think that this is another example of an instance where it would be great for the country if more folks had a better understanding of fundamental civics around the court system, right? How it works, what's involved, who's who can do what and who can't do what, right? So I think Caitlin's exactly right. You're going to see Trump talking about this. He's going to be messaging on it, and maybe the same and the same won't come probably from the prosecution. The other thing is, this is going to last a long time, right? I mean, it's going to be drawn out. Trump try to milk it at every turn. He's going to use those images of him being either handcuffed or fingerprinted or mugshotted or whatever. He's going to use them to his advantage with his base and really try to rally that support.
Yeah, Caitlin, I think that continues to play into a distrustful narrative that, has really come about in the United States in the past 15 years about not trusting government, not trusting process, and the ability to use those kinds of images, to Trump's advantage. I look forward a little bit down the line to a presidential election in 24 and what this could possibly mean. And when you're thinking about writing things and covering things, what kind of goes through your mind, and really with the Michigan lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about threats to democracy. I don't think that all of them are necessarily valid, but at this point in time, I think there is a real threat to democracy, and I think that we're doing it to ourselves, which is kind of the frustrating thing. But that threat is there. We've been toppling institutions. We've been topping norms in electoral processes for several years now. And I think we are reaching a point that is dangerous. But again, it's somewhat self-inflicted. We are very divided, and, a house divided won't stand. So we're at a dangerous point, and it's time to, like Dave said, get back to what is our civic responsibility and understanding how our government really should be working to serve everyone.
Dave, I'm going to give you a last word on this in terms of what we should be looking for and what we should keep in mind as we watch this process play out, especially here in Michigan.
Yeah, and this is going to play out in the press, and I think that's really something that we should think about and pay attention to, and your viewers need to be aware of, right? Is that this is going to be played out in the media, which is another aspect that plays into Trump's hands. His supporters love it when he takes on the media and challenges the press. And I think you're going to see that antagonistic relationship that he has with the media continue for as long as this thing lasts, as long as it drags out.
All right. Thanks so much. Caitlin Buss from the Detroit News. It's always good to see you. And Dave Dulio from Oakland University. It's great to see you as well. Appreciate it, guys. All right, we talk about the support strengthening for the former president in the Republican Party, and especially, you heard both Caitlin and Dave talk about that base of support that is present here in Michigan. Yesterday, the Michigan GOP put out a tweet, and we can go ahead and put that up. Thanks so much, Ian. And it said, "It's a dark day in American history when government agencies willingly target individual citizens for political purposes. Today, it is President Trump. Tomorrow, it could be any one of us." And that is really playing on the distrust that I think that both Caitlin and Dave talked about of process. And part of that is being able to explain what the process is. And we're going to get to that. Coming up, we're going to examine the legal next steps here with the former president. Plus, we are going to head live to New York to talk about some of the safety precautions that are going to be happening in Manhattan over the next couple of days, looking for the former president when he's coming in to be arraigned. So stay with me. Our coverage continues in just a moment. And welcome back to our special live coverage of the fallout from the indictment of former President Donald Trump. You're looking at live pictures right now from New York and Trump Tower. The next legal steps really have to play out here. The former president is expected to be in court on Tuesday. What we are hearing from reports right now about 2:15 in the afternoon. But joining me now to talk through the legal process is George Danini. He's a partner at Butzel Law Firm who specializes in white-collar criminal defense. George, it's good to see you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Christy. How are you?
I'm well. Walk me through this. And I think this is what's really interesting. We know some, but we really don't know a lot here. The indictment is sealed. We don't know exactly what the charges are. But we already have so many people coming out saying this is a raw deal, this is a bad process. And so for me, George, the thing is making people understand what this actual legal process is that's playing out right now.
Sure. So, look, the grand jury process operates in secret. That is a normal process across the United States, both in federal and state courts. And so that's what happened here in New York. The Manhattan DA presented evidence to a grand jury. That happens in secret. The only ones in the room are the grand jurors, the witnesses called to the grand jury room, and the prosecutor and a court reporter to take a transcript of what occurs in the room. So that is not abnormal. That is a normal part of the judicial system. And apparently, we now know that an indictment has been issued by that grand jury. As you said, it's under seal. There have been reports that I've seen that there are 30 or more counts associated with that indictment. But again, we haven't seen it. Former President Trump is scheduled, as you said, to appear on Tuesday afternoon to be arraigned on that indictment. And that's when, or probably shortly before then, is when it will be unsealed.
I think sometimes the word secret can give really negative connotations at this point, that it's not being transparent, but this is really a process. And when you're in the grand jury process, there are also different levels of evidence that can be put in, and there's also different, I guess, thresholds for taking things into consideration as well, correct? Just to get an indictment, because again, this isn't a conviction, this isn't, these are charges.
Correct. So an indictment are merely allegations at this point. It's a relatively low standard, certainly for the criminal justice system. Is there probable cause to believe these events occurred, these allegations occurred? So essentially, think of an indictment as a piece of paper that has to be proven and go through the process. So once that becomes unsealed, then it's out in the public domain, and everything will be readily apparent for all who want to pay attention, which is going to be plenty.
Which is, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be plenty. A lot of people are also talking about there are other investigations. Of course, the Justice Department is looking into the president. Also, there are things happening down in Georgia with Fulton County why wouldn't you let them take the lead? Well, why aren't we seeing the charges out of Georgia? Why isn't the Justice Department coming out? There's no conversation that prosecutors have saying you should go first or you should go first, correct?
Certainly that shouldn't be happening. What's happening behind the scenes, I don't know. I don't assume that anything like that is going on. I think each of these investigations are on their own independent tracks. So the Manhattan DA obviously came out with its indictment. Well, it'll be public soon, but we know it's happened. In Fulton County, Georgia, the district attorney there, who's looking into the efforts to overturn the Georgia results in the 2020 election. Some had speculated that might come out first, but obviously that didn't happen. That still could happen any day or any week or any month now.
Yeah.
And as you said, the special counsel, Jack Smith, on the DOJ side, they're on the Department of Justice side, they're looking at the two things, which are the classified materials that the former president kept at his Mar-a-Lago residence, as well as all the events from the January 6th storming of the Capitol.
So, George, you are a defense attorney in white-collar crimes. Talk us through what the steps are when you have a client that has to turn himself in or herself in for arraignment. What is the process there?
Sure. So once somebody's indicted, there's kind of two paths. One is there could have been an arrest warrant issued, and the person would be arrested and brought into court to stand in front of the judge for arraignment purposes. That obviously did not happen here. I wouldn't have expected it to happen here. A lot of the cases that I handle have happened this exact way, where a prosecutor will contact me. I'm sure most of the time I'll know what's coming, just like in this case. And then I would bring my client in for processing and to stand in front of the judge to plead, well, here obviously not guilt charges. I'm happy to talk about that process a little bit more if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. We have about another 5 seconds.
Sure. So, I heard in the prior segment talk about handcuffs and booking and all that. All of that stuff, there's no perp walk that I anticipate happening here. That's nothing like that's going to go on. Whatever processing will happen kind of behind the scenes. I think the only thing that will be there in the public domain is, probably a very dramatic event of a former president of the United States standing in a courtroom pleading not guilty to the charges that have been levied against him.
Yeah, this is a lot. It's going to play out. And George Nini, I really appreciate the context that you bring and a little bit of the insight and information on what we're going to see play out probably on Tuesday afternoon. Thanks so much for joining me. All right, as we know, security preparations are underway in Manhattan for this arraignment that we're talking about that will happen on Tuesday. And since the president put out on social media about 2 weeks ago that this was going to happen, it has been an all kind of hands on deck situation in New York City waiting for this to happen. And then it came out yesterday afternoon. We're going to go live to New York right now to WNBC's Mark Santia. But before he was WNBC's Mark Santia, he was WDIV's Mark Santia. Mark, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me. Before I was WDIV's Mark Santia, I was Roseville High School's Mark Santia, and we
That's
go
right.
way back.
That's right. Yeah, it's great to see you. No, I mean, thanks for joining me. Give us the perspective of what you have been covering the last couple of weeks, and I think now really going forward with security preparations because we don't exactly know what this is going to look like.
Right, and folks here down in Midtown, throughout Manhattan, what you're looking at, Christy, is we're at Midtown. We're in Midtown Manhattan. So this is 56th and 5th Avenue. These are all of your top stores, right? This is 5th Avenue. This is Trump Tower here. This is where the former president resided after he was elected, and he has still been back. So we have always seen, the last several years, we have seen a heavy police presence here, barricades, concrete blocks. We're seeing some of that ramped up a little bit here, but court, which is going to happen in Lower Manhattan, which is about a couple miles from here. So we have multiple locations. But what we've seen so far, Chrissy, has been very, very peaceful. There are protesters out today. There are folks here rallying. But it's been a very peaceful day. We don't expect anything different. You can see behind me, traffic is moving up and down Fifth Avenue. NYPD, they have been planning for this. So I talked to a couple law enforcement sources just before I jumped on with you. And we're like, look, this didn't take us by surprise. We've been planning. We have been watching, and they're also posturing, right? They're looking, and they're really focusing on social media. They're looking for any kind of chatter that would sort of tip the hand or show, hey, a rally might be planned here, or there could be a demonstration there. They're not hearing any sort of direct threats, but again, they're just watching the chatter and they're monitoring. We're expecting the arraignment obviously on Tuesday, so we're going to see sort of police presence continually grow, and it will definitely be a heavy police presence here. The reason we're at Trump Tower is the symbolism. We know the former president's not here, but this has been a symbolic location for the last 10 days or so as folks on either side have sort of lined up here and voiced their opinion. So we're seeing that here, Christy, and that's what we're seeing today. And so that's kind of where we're at. There is an increased police presence, but
Yeah.
all members of the police department, thousands of New York City Police Department, every single rank, they've been told to dress today in uniform and be ready to mobilize just in case. So they're definitely watching, waiting. I'm not hearing any concern in their voice. They're not seeing anything that would lead them to be concerned, but they're definitely watching.
Yeah, one of the finest police departments in the world, and they've dealt with so many more and varied things than this. And I'm sure we'll get some more detail maybe Monday or Tuesday about how this is all going to go down, if the former president comes to Trump Tower first or if he goes directly to the courthouse, and we know you'll be on it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Christy. So things will still develop, obviously. Which airport, where will the president come into? Where will the former president, which airport will the former president come into? Where will the former president be staying? Will he stay? Or will he show up for his court appearance and then head back to Florida? So all of that, like you said, Christy, will really be worked out in the next 48 hours or so as sort of more intel comes in and things get figured out. The NYPD working very closely with their federal counterparts, with the FBI, with the Secret Service, just trying to figure out sort of how to bring him in and how to move him out and how to keep everyone in the process safe.
All right, Santi, I know you got a lot of work today to do. I'm sure you're live at 5.
Thank you, Chris. You know too well. You know that Dave Manny too well.
I know. He's got you working. That's right.
And
Mark
Santia.
You know
it's not just 5. It's 4 and 6, Christy. Maybe you could
4,
talk
5, 6. I hope you do a live talk back
right.
at 7. Mark Santia, WNBC. Hey, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you.
All right. And as we continue our live coverage here of the indictment of former President Trump, I just want to go real quick as we wrap up today to Devin Scillian. He's joining us live. I know he's working on Flashpoint. They're going to be talking about this on Sunday morning. Hey, Devin, a lot transpired, and you and I have been talking about how this was going to go down and really the impact on Michigan.
It's funny, one of the questions that I get, and you now as part of the Flashpoint family, we get the most often is, when is Flashpoint going to be an hour? The question we'll get this week is, why isn't Flashpoint 6 hours? Because there was already so much going on this past week between the new president at the UAW, Alyssa Slotkin, and her gun measures. We had another school shooting, of course, which is all that much more intensified on our feelings after Michigan State and Oxford. And then, of course, this happens. And as I said this past week, and you and I were talking about it, just because we knew it was coming didn't make it any less extraordinary. I mean, it's really a stunning moment at which we've arrived. But the thing that I keep thinking about is this is just one of a four-legged table that is in front of Donald Trump. He's still got the January 6th issue. He's still got Georgia. There's still just a lot in front of him here that is going to make this just the first volley in what feels like will be a long-running odyssey.
Yeah, I mean, pick your analogy, the beginning of the marathon. I mean, this is really day one of it. So, Devin, what can we look forward to seeing on Flashpoint today, and who are you having on?
Well, we do have Alyssa Slotkin coming in to talk about her federal gun measures, and of course that was well in the works before what happened in Nashville. And she appeared in Washington this week side by side with a survivor from Oxford and a survivor from the shooting at Michigan State. But the question remains: can we legislate our way out of this uniquely American problem? We're going to talk about that with her. We'll also get her thoughts and reaction to what happened, of course, this week with the president. And then in our roundtable, we got a really good group coming in to talk about all of these issues. But as I mentioned, this very pugnacious labor situation that has suddenly developed in Michigan, where we become the first state in 60 years to do away with right-to-work laws. And then the new president of the UAW, just after he was newly minted as the president, starts referring to the big three as the enemy. This is a really interesting place we've arrived right now, given how intense competition is for new plants, new jobs, new innovation among the big three. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And the tax cut that is going to be implemented in Michigan, but Dana Nessel has ruled will only be for 1 year. Hardly anybody, it seems, at the Capitol agrees with that, but we'll talk about that too. So plenty to get to, and unfortunately not 6 hours to do it.
I was just going to say, sign me up for whenever the 6-hour Flashpoint is. I'd love to see
on
it.
in.
All right.
I'll meet you if we're going to do it.
Well, that's right. All right. I'm going to see you later on today. Thanks so much for joining
You
us
bet.
here on Local 4 Plus. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, see you, Devin. And thanks so much for joining us for our live coverage here on Local 4 Plus of the indictment of former President Donald Trump. Look, we have all the information for you on clickondetroit.com if you want to see what this all means, also what the process is of indictments, grand juries, answering some of your questions as well. And we will continue to cover this, of course, here at Local 4 and at NBC News. And that's going to do it for me this afternoon. So for all of us here at WDIV, I'm Christy McDonald. You take care, and I'll see you again.